Stephen, your chapter for sake, we all lose in the war against nature. Has you remembering the visit to the Bronx Zoo when you were, what, 10? And you're confronted by a mirror above which was a sign saying you're looking at the most dangerous animal in the world. It was unsettling for you then, and I surmise it's unsettling for a generation to realize that the world would be less hospitable to life, more storms, droughts, both having greater length and intensities. This is the Anthropocene, as some call it, but I also know that you prefer to use a different word, and for good reason, one that adds hope to the conversation. They say that crises can bring opportunities for change. If the current pandemic does not do that, climate disruption certainly will. Can you discuss with us your thoughts on what opportunities right now are before us? The opportunities that offer hope for a healthier and more just post-COVID-19 world.
Yes, I think there are a number of opportunities that are presented to us in this crisis. And it, of course, indeed is a crisis. And it is impacting people of color, of marginalized economic and socio-political means more harshly, obviously, than people who are more affluent. And as you and I have discussed before and written together before, this ecological crisis runs along the same fault lines as social, political, economic, gendered, and racial oppression. And this COVID crisis is no different. So as long as we have these fissures, ecologically, socially, economically, racially, within our society, the molten lava of any crisis will flow right into those rivulets and fissures that are pre-grooved in our society. However, in light of what has happened with this particular pandemic, we're seeing a whole new understanding of governments. In the neoliberal moment, post-1980 with Ronald Reagan in the United States, with Margaret Thatcher in the UK, as you remember, government became a kind of dirty word. And you had heads of state critiquing their own governments, which they represented as being antithetical to economic growth and prosperity. It was like self-flagellation at the political level in a way that is rarely seen. Now, we may not have the invisible hand of the marketplace, but we have the invisible hand of the COVID pandemic, which is reaching out and killing so many. So people aren't relying on that invisible hand to build the economy. Where do they go? They go to the government.
Yeah.
And now government stock has gone way up. And what's encouraging for me amidst this horrible moment is things that were impossible are now being done. They're not only possible, they're being implemented. For example, for years, homeless advocates around the world and in Toronto have been saying, we have thousands of homeless on our streets. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of vacancies in abandoned buildings, unrented buildings, empty hotel rooms. Why can we not, as a government, take those over and house our homeless populations? Well, lo and behold, in Toronto, 1 month ago, a hotel of 200 rooms was taken over by the government. And homeless people who are showing signs of COVID are now housed there. But they're not only housed there, they are given medical treatment, they are given food, and they are socially distant. They are given space to be. Something impossible has become doable. Secondly, we talk about how it's important to think about our spaces differently in the cities. And many cities have advocated, and activists have advocated for closures of streets so that cyclists and pedestrians could have more free space to roam. Well, you can't do that because that would impede the flow of traffic and business as usual. Well, guess what? Major cities across North America, from Oakland to Calgary, are now closing city streets, including Washington, D.C., opening them up to pedestrians, children, families. Something that was impossible is being done. another area where we see these kinds of movements. And that is in the area of sound. What's interesting now is we have this kind of moment where we don't have the background ambient white noise of a consumer economy on steroids. We just celebrated Earth Day, April 22nd, 2020, the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. This is the first Earth Day when the background white noise of that full throttle, business as usual neoliberal economy was on pause. And what do we hear? We hear birdsong. We hear coyotes howling. We see wildlife dancing across our streets. I saw a fox the other day where I never have seen a fox before. Sylvia Poggioli, a correspondent for National Public Radio covering Rome, says she's never heard sounds like she hears now in downtown Rome. She said you can hear hinges creak on doors. And she said the birds are almost too loud in central Rome.
That's amazing.
Isn't it amazing? So you know, of course, the notion of sound and soundlessness was the motif for Rachel Carson in Silent Spring. In 1962, thinking about a spring bereft of birdsong was a nightmare because of DDT and how it was laced across our ecosystems, contaminating fish up the food chain to birds, raptors, other forms of wildlife. Imagining a spring that was silent, bereft of birdsong. Well, today, on this Earth Day, and now the subsequent weeks after, we hear birdsong in major urban centers around the world, which we have not heard in midday for decades. Tom Berry, the cultural historian, said we need to listen to the earth. We've lost the ability to listen to the voices of the natural world. This COVID pandemic, horrible as it is, unjustly variegated as it is also giving us a moment to listen to the voices of nature in urban areas like we've never done before. It's an invitation to be attentive to what we hear and remember what we don't hear when we go back to our full court press ecological and economic destructiveness. So Coca-Cola used to have the ad, the pause that refreshes. This might be an ecological pause that refreshes our sensibilities, our spiritual sensibilities about what we are missing, what creatures are speaking to us. And for those from the religious side of the help wanted ads, it might be saying, how is the spirit, the divine, speaking through those voices? Many traditions talk about listening to the still, quiet voice of the divine. Well, how is that being articulated in the bird song? The song of chickadees and starlings and robins and red-winged blackbirds and mourning doves that we now hear in downtown centers at noon, that were normally drowned out by construction, traffic, and the bustle of our economy going full tilt. It reminds us that our current business as usual economic paradigm, as it grows, it diminishes our ecosystems. Economic growth at the expense of the ecological systems that give us life. This COVID crisis is an invitation to pause and think differently about how we relate to that which gives us life, and to think about things that were impossible becoming possible.